Now, I've finished with the stuff that I'm going to actually do lab on, but I do want to talk a little bit more about some other thermodynamic stuff. First of all, whenever you have energy, you have thermal energy, there are different ways that that energy can be removed from an object. One of them is through conduction. Okay. Conduction just means, okay, there is a hot poker in the fireplace and I pick it up and grab it with my hand is going to become hot because of the conduction. I'm in thermal contact with that poker and therefore I become hot. That is transfer based on thermal contact. Second way that that energy can be transferred is by convection. Okay? So convection, I take that poker out of the fireplace and I know better than to touch it, but I sit it next to me and I put my hand close enough to it and I put a fan on the other side and the fan is blowing across that poker and it's taking the warm energy and blowing it under my hand, and what I can feel is warm because the heat is being taken by convection, by that blowing. And it can be fan, it can be water that's moving the energy. It's moving it away based on basically blowing past it. Okay, so that is transfer based on some medium traveling past. So there's a more elegant way to say that, but it could be water, it could be air, whatever. You're blowing past it. That's what convection is. Okay? And the third way would be radiation. And radiation, basically, if you're at a high enough temperature, then there's radiation coming as a means of losing energy. Radiation comes out of that hot item. So for instance, if you've ever messed around with a fire much, and I know lots of people tend to really enjoy fires and poking around in them, etc. Sometimes after you have a fire, even if it's a fire at nighttime, like the next day, it kind of looks like you got a suntan, looks like windburn or whatever on your face. Well, that's because of the radiation. Even though you aren't touching it, and you're not blowing across or you're not, that kind of thing, but there's radiation that's actually coming out of there, which is hitting your face, and that radiation can be ultraviolet radiation, just like sunlight. Okay, we talked already about different spectra of different types of radiation. It doesn't mean that this is some radiation that's going to cause cancer or whatever else, but in the same way that you can get a sunburn by being out in ultraviolet radiation, you can get a sunburn just sitting next to a fire in the middle of the night, because it's the same type of mechanism. And so that radiation that comes off depends on how hot things are. And the equation that tells you how much radiation you're going to get, what the power of radiation is going to be, has to do with the area of the object. So if you think about a little tiny, a poker that's thin like the size of a pencil or a little bit more than that, it doesn't have a whole lot of exterior area. However, if you talked about a big chunk of copper or whatever, it would be very, very hot. Depends on what's something called the emissivity. It just basically has to do with how good a job, we usually just estimate that the emissivity is 1, but how good a job does this particle do of radiating? And then it has to do with the temperature to the 4th power. But it's not just the temperature to the 4th power, it's the temperature of the object minus the temperature of the background. So if you were to do, the object itself is 400 degrees C and the background is 23 degrees C, then you would do that subtraction, and actually, it's not quantity to the 4th. They're each to the 4th, okay? So it's that difference, okay? And then there's something called the Stefan-Boltzmann constant, which just basically, again, that's just a constant that you can use for doing this calculation. And this equation is why we're able to use things like night vision goggles, etc. There needs to be a difference between the background and the object itself. I don't know if any of you guys know the movie Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but, what ends up happening is that he's able to hide himself by getting like underneath cool mud, and so the thing that can see, the predator, that can see in ultraviolet can't, or in infrared, can't see him because of the fact that he's hidden because he's in the mud, because he makes his background temperature the same, or his temperature the same as the background temperature. So if you have a difference here, so for instance, I go into this room, and this room's sitting at 25 degrees C, and I've got humans sitting in this room, and if they're at normal body temperature, they're at 37 degrees C. Well, there's going to be radiation produced by that. You're going to have 37 to the fourth minus 20, or no, it's not 37 because you would put this in terms of K. So 37 plus 270, 310 to the fourth minus 298 to the fourth, okay? And there's going to be a big enough of a difference there that there's going to be some light that's going to be emitted. And it's not going to be in the visible spectrum. Now, sometimes it is. If you get hot enough, it's in the visible spectrum. You see, you put a piece of metal in the fire and it glows. That's because it's emitting in the visible spectrum. But it's going to be hot enough that if you have appropriate equipment to detect infrared light waves, you're going to be able to see it because of that radiation that's coming off those things. And if you, instead you took some cold-blooded critters and put it in this lab. So if I had a snake and various other things crawling around the floor here, and we came in here with night vision goggles, their temperature, because they're cold-blooded, unless they've been out in the sun for a while, their temperature is the same as the background temperature. They adjust to be whatever temperature it is in here. And there would be no difference here. And you would see no radiation, and you wouldn't be able to see that there were snakes in there. You could see it in the visible spectrum, but you wouldn't be able to see it in the infrared spectrum, which is where you would use night vision goggles, and that's where the detectors for night vision goggles would be trained.